Welcome to Macomb Paranormal Investigations and Research. Tonight, we explore one of the most unsettling questions in the paranormal world. What if fear itself can create paranormal activity? What if the terrifying experiences people encounter in haunted places are not always caused by ghosts, demons, or spirits, but by the human mind itself? And perhaps even more disturbing, what if fear can somehow attract something real? For decades, paranormal investigators, psychologists, scientists, and witnesses have debated a chilling possibility. Does fear distort our perception and make us believe ordinary events are supernatural? Or can intense emotion actually fuel paranormal experiences? Tonight, we dive deep into the psychology of fear, haunted locations, shadow figures, sleep paralysis, mass hysteria, and the terrifying possibility that human consciousness may influence the paranormal itself. Because sometimes the scariest thing in a haunted location may not be the darkness around you. It may be the fear inside you. Turn down the lights and let's step into the shadows. Fear is one of the oldest survival instincts humans possess. Long before cities, electricity, or modern life, fear kept our ancestors alive. Fear warned them of predators hiding in forests. Fear sharpened their senses in dangerous situations. Fear prepared the body to fight, flee, or freeze. When fear activates, the human brain changes instantly. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, muscles tighten, adrenaline floods the bloodstream, the senses become hyper-alert, and something else happens. The brain begins searching desperately for threats. Every sound becomes suspicious. Every shadow becomes movement. Every unexplained noise suddenly feels dangerous. Now place someone in a reportedly haunted building, an abandoned asylum, a dark cemetery, a decaying tunnel underground. Immediately, the brain enters survival mode. That creaking floorboard could just be old wood settling, but fear whispers something different. What if someone is walking behind you? This is where psychology and the paranormal begin overlapping in fascinating and terrifying ways. Many researchers believe fear dramatically changes how humans interpret their environment. In darkness, the brain fills gaps in missing information. Shapes become faces. Sounds become whispers. Shadows seem alive. But paranormal investigators often argue there's more happening than simple imagination. Because sometimes multiple people witness the same thing at the same time. And that's where the mystery deepens. One of the most famous examples of fear affecting perception is the phenomenon known as pareidolia. Pareidolia occurs when the human brain sees meaningful patterns in random objects, faces in shadows, figures in darkness, shapes in fog. Humans are biologically wired to recognize faces quickly. It helped early humans identify threats instantly. But this same survival mechanism can also create terrifying false perceptions. You stare into darkness long enough, and eventually the darkness begins staring back. This explains why so many paranormal encounters involve vague figures standing at the edge of vision. The human eye struggles in low light. The brain fills in missing details. Fear amplifies uncertainty. But here's where things become unsettling. Paranormal investigators frequently report experiences that go beyond visual misinterpretation. Objects moving, intelligent responses during EVP sessions, multiple witnesses describing identical phenomena. So the question becomes, does fear merely distort reality? Or can fear somehow interact with something unknown? Some paranormal theories suggest human emotion may influence environments more than we realize. Intense emotional states, fear, grief, rage, trauma, are often associated with reported hauntings. Paranormal researchers sometimes refer to this as emotional energy. The idea proposes that strong emotions may somehow leave imprints on locations or even fuel paranormal manifestations. This theory appears repeatedly in haunted house reports. Families under extreme stress often report escalating paranormal activity. Arguments increase. Anxiety rises. Sleep deprivation worsens. Strange experiences begin multiplying. Could stress simply heighten awareness and imagination? Absolutely. But some investigators believe fear itself may act almost like a beacon, a signal, a source of energy. Ancient cultures across the world carried similar beliefs. Stories of malevolent spirits feeding on fear appear in folklore from nearly every civilization. Shadow beings, demons, trickster spirits, dark entities lurking at the edge of human consciousness. Many legends warn against showing fear. Why? Because fear supposedly gives these entities power. Whether symbolic or literal, that idea has survived for thousands of years. Modern paranormal investigators sometimes describe the same pattern during investigations. The more frightened a person becomes, the more intense the experiences seem to grow. Equipment malfunctions increase. Strange sounds become more frequent. Witnesses feel overwhelmed. Some investigators interpret this as proof that emotional energy influences paranormal environments. Skeptics argue fear simply heightens attention and causes confirmation bias. And honestly, both explanations can feel equally disturbing. Because even if paranormal experiences are psychological, fear can still make them completely real to the person experiencing them. One of the clearest examples of fear creating terrifying experiences is sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis occurs when the body temporarily remains immobilized while the brain partially wakes from sleep. During these moments, people often experience intense fear, pressure on the chest, shadow figures, whispering voices, or dark entities standing nearby. And the experiences feel horrifyingly real. For centuries, cultures worldwide interpreted sleep paralysis as demonic attacks, witchcraft, or spirit visitation. Even today, people describe seeing identical shadowy figures during episodes. Tall, dark silhouettes, hat-wearing entities, creatures crouched beside the bed. Science explains much of this as the brain mixing dream imagery with waking consciousness. But the consistency of these encounters across cultures continues fascinating paranormal researchers. Why do so many people see similar entities during states of fear? Could the human brain be generating the same archetypal fears? Or are people glimpsing something that exists just beyond ordinary perception? Fear also plays a major role in haunted locations themselves. Imagine walking alone through an abandoned hospital at night. The silence feels unnatural. Your flashlight barely cuts through the darkness. Every hallway seems endless. Your mind begins anticipating danger before anything even happens. And suddenly, you hear a noise. At that moment, fear transforms the experience instantly. Your heart pounds, your breathing changes, your thoughts race, and now your brain begins connecting every detail into a terrifying narrative. That's why paranormal investigations can become psychologically intense very quickly. Fear alters perception in real time, but investigators often encounter experiences they struggle to explain logically. Cold spots appearing suddenly, equipment activating unexpectedly, voices captured on recordings, feelings of overwhelming dread in specific rooms. Some scientists believe environmental conditions may trigger many of these sensations naturally. High electromagnetic fields, infrasound vibrations, mold exposure, and carbon monoxide have all been linked to hallucinations, paranoia, anxiety, and feelings of being watched. In some famous haunting cases, faulty wiring or toxic exposure may have contributed to paranormal experiences. But not every case fits neatly into those explanations. And that uncertainty keeps the paranormal mystery alive. One fascinating psychological phenomenon related to fear is mass hysteria. Mass hysteria occurs when groups of people begin sharing symptoms, fears, or beliefs that spread socially through suggestion and anxiety. Entire communities have reported ghost sightings, demonic encounters, or supernatural events during periods of stress and fear. The Salem witch trials are a classic example. Fear spread rapidly through the community until ordinary events became interpreted as supernatural attacks. Fear became contagious. And once fear takes hold collectively, reality itself begins shifting. Modern paranormal investigations can sometimes experience similar dynamics. If one investigator panics after hearing a noise, the emotional tension spreads instantly to everyone else. Soon, every creak becomes threatening. Every shadow seems alive. But here's what makes the paranormal world so fascinating. Sometimes, investigators capture evidence even when no one present feels afraid at all. Calm investigators have recorded unexplained voices. Objects have reportedly moved during controlled conditions. Witnesses have shared experiences long before they knew a location was supposedly haunted. That's why many paranormal researchers believe fear alone cannot explain every haunting. Still, fear undeniably shapes how humans experience the unknown. And perhaps nowhere is that clearer than with shadow people. Shadow figure encounters are among the most common paranormal experiences reported worldwide. Witnesses describe dark humanoid shapes moving quickly through rooms, standing in doorways, or watching silently from corners. Fear almost always accompanies these sightings. Some psychologists believe shadow figures result from the brain misinterpreting low-light environments combined with heightened anxiety. Others point towards sleep deprivation, trauma, or peripheral vision distortions. But paranormal believers argue the consistency of these encounters is impossible to ignore. Across different countries, cultures, and generations, people describe nearly identical entities, tall shadows, featureless black forms, an overwhelming feeling of dread, and perhaps most disturbing, the sensation that the figure is aware of them. Could fear itself be generating these entities psychologically? Or does fear somehow allow humans to perceive something normally hidden? That question sits at the center of countless paranormal theories. Some investigators believe human consciousness may act like a filter. Under normal conditions, the brain blocks out enormous amounts of information constantly, but extreme fear may disrupt that filter temporarily. In other words, fear might not create paranormal activity. Fear might make people more sensitive to it. That possibility becomes even more unsettling when examining reports from intense emotional events. People experiencing grief often report seeing deceased loved ones. Trauma survivors sometimes describe paranormal encounters during periods of extreme stress. Near-death experiences frequently involve vivid spiritual experiences. Could these simply be coping mechanisms created by the brain? Possibly. But many witnesses insist these experiences felt more real than ordinary reality itself. Some paranormal theories also suggest locations absorb emotional trauma over time. Old battlefields, prisons, hospitals, asylums, homes where violent tragedies occurred. These locations repeatedly become associated with hauntings, perhaps because human beings instinctively sense emotional history, or perhaps because something genuinely remains behind. Fear may also affect paranormal investigations through expectation. If investigators enter a location already believing it is haunted, they naturally pay closer attention to unusual details. This is called confirmation bias. The brain unconsciously searches for evidence supporting existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory information. Paranormal investigators themselves often acknowledge this danger. Serious investigators attempt to debunk natural explanations first. They check wiring, environmental conditions, airflow, structural sounds, and outside interference before labeling something paranormal. Because fear and expectation can easily distort interpretation, but even experienced skeptics occasionally encounter moments they cannot explain. That's when the conversation becomes truly interesting, because the paranormal exists in uncertainty, and fear thrives in uncertainty. One of the darkest theories in paranormal research involves the concept of thought forms, or tulpas. This idea suggests intense collective belief and emotional focus might somehow create independent paranormal entities. Essentially, fear itself could manifest phenomena. The theory appears in various spiritual traditions and occult beliefs. Modern paranormal discussions sometimes reference it when discussing urban legends like Slender Man or widespread shadow person reports. If millions of people focus fear and attention on the same concept, could something emerge psychologically or perhaps paranormally from that collective energy? Most scientists reject this entirely, but the theory remains deeply unsettling because it suggests fear may not simply distort reality. Fear might shape it, And even if paranormal activity ultimately has scientific explanations, fear still possesses enormous power over the human mind. Fear changes memory. Fear changes perception. Fear changes behavior. People experiencing intense fear often report distorted time perception. Minutes feel like hours. Small sounds feel explosive. Ordinary events become unforgettable. This is why paranormal encounters often remain burned into memory for decades. The emotional intensity makes them feel undeniably real. And perhaps that's why haunted stories survive generation after generation. Because fear itself leaves marks on the human mind. But there's another side of this conversation that many paranormal investigators discuss quietly. Sometimes fear seems to disappear entirely during truly strange experiences. Witnesses often describe moments of calm during sightings, almost like shock overrides emotion temporarily. Then later, the terror arrives. That delayed fear response fascinates researchers because it suggests some experiences bypass normal psychological expectations entirely. People don't always react the way horror movies suggest they should. Sometimes the unknown feels strangely unreal in the moment, until afterward, when the mind begins processing what happened. And that may explain why so many paranormal witnesses struggle to describe their experiences clearly. The human brain desperately wants logical explanations. When something challenges normal understanding, fear fills the gap. And perhaps that's the true relationship between fear and the paranormal. Fear may not always create paranormal activity, but fear gives the unknown its power. A shadow in daylight is just a shadow. A shadow in darkness becomes something terrifying. An old building during the day feels historical. At midnight, it feels haunted. The human mind transforms uncertainty into horror instinctively. Yet despite all the psychological explanations, countless paranormal cases remain unresolved. Investigators continue capturing strange recordings. Witnesses continue reporting experiences. Locations continue developing terrifying reputations generation after generation. And perhaps the reason paranormal stories endure is because they exist exactly where science, psychology, and mystery collide. Because no matter how much humans understand the brain, there are still moments that leave even skeptics uncomfortable. Moments where fear feels justified. Moments where something in the darkness feels truly wrong. And maybe that feeling itself is part of being human. Fear reminds us we are vulnerable. Fear reminds us there are still things we do not fully understand. And perhaps most importantly, fear reminds us the unknown still exists. So, can fear create paranormal activity? Maybe psychologically, maybe emotionally, maybe spiritually, or maybe fear simply opens the door for experiences we cannot yet explain. Whatever the answer may be, one thing is certain. Fear changes how we see the world. And sometimes, what we see staring back from the darkness changes us forever. Thank you for joining us tonight on Macomb Paranormal Investigations and Research. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the podcast. And remember, always look into the shadows, because sometimes fear is the only thing standing between us and whatever may be hiding there.